I never meant to stop in the middle of that street. I was just trying to get my daughter home before the storm got worse. But sometimes life chooses the moment for you. It was 7:42 p.m., Willow Creek downtown. Rain coming down in sheets so heavy, the streetlights looked like blurred halos. And right there, half hidden behind a bus stop sign, stood a small girl, no older than 8, soaked to the bone, hugging her backpack as if it was the only thing keeping her together. Her name, I would later learn, was Emily, but at that moment, all I saw was a child trembling in the downpour, crying silently like she didn't want the world to notice. And that was when Daniel Hale's single father, night shift mechanic, man who'd barely held his own life together that week, hit the brakes without thinking. He stepped out of the truck with his hood up, boots splashing in the rising puddles. His daughter Chloe, 7 years old and unfiltered as sunlight, leaned forward in the passenger seat, whispering, "Daddy, she's really sad." Daniel swallowed hard. He'd seen that same kind of quiet crying before, the kind people do when their whole world is falling apart and they're trying not to be a burden. He walked toward the girl slowly, careful not to scare her. "Hey," he said, keeping his voice low and warm despite the cold rain. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" The girl wiped her nose with the back of her hand, but didn't speak. Her thin pink jacket was drenched, and her backpack strap was broken on one side, hanging like it had given up on her too. Daniel crouched, so he was level with her trembling eyes. "My name's Daniel. My daughter's right there in the truck, see? You're not alone, sweetheart. Can I help you?" The girl's lips quivered as she finally whispered, I got lost. I was supposed to meet my mum, but she's not here. And my phone, it fell in a puddle. It doesn't work now." Her voice cracked, and she bit her trembling lip to hide it. Daniel felt something twist deep inside him. Chloe had already opened the passenger door and was out in the rain before he could stop her. That was how she was, pure heart first, logic after. "Hi," Chloe said softly, offering the stranger girl her own dry sweater. "You can borrow this. Daddy says nobody should feel cold alone." Emily hesitated, then took it with shaking fingers, pulling it over her wet clothes. The moment she did, her tears broke again, but this time not in fear, more like relief opening a floodgate. Daniel stood, slowly guiding both girls to the truck. "Come on. We'll keep you warm until your mum gets here. Do you know her phone number?" Emily nodded, shivering. Daniel got her into the back seat, turned the heater on, then pulled out his phone. She recited the number in a tiny, scared voice. He tried calling once. Straight to voicemail, twice. Voicemail again. The storm roared, thunder cracking above them like the sky was splitting open. Chloe held Emily's hand, rubbing it to warm her, her brows drawn together with concern far too mature for her age. As the minutes passed, Daniel kept glancing at the rain-shielded windshield. Something about this girl's fear felt familiar. Too familiar. He'd spent years doing his best to make sure his daughter never had to wait on a sidewalk in the dark, wondering if he'd show up. He'd promised himself he'd never let Chloe feel what he once did. He shook the memory off before it swallowed him. "It's okay," Daniel murmured to the girls. "We'll find your mum. I promise." He tried calling again, and this time the line rang. 1 ring, 2, 3. Then someone picked up, breathlessly. "Hello?" A woman's voice, sharp, anxious, trembling like she'd been running or crying, or both. Daniel cleared his throat. "Hi, yes, I'm with your daughter Emily. She's safe. She's with me and my little girl in my truck on Willow Creek." He didn't even finish before the woman gasped, a sound like disbelief mixed with something heavier. Where exactly?" Daniel described the location. The woman said she'd be there in 3 minutes, and hung up without another word. Daniel slipped the phone into his pocket and exhaled. Something in the way she reacted tugged at him, like an echo he couldn't place. but he brushed it off. All that mattered was making sure the girl felt safe until her mother arrived. Inside the truck, Emily stared out the window, her breath fogging the glass. "She's gonna be mad," she whispered. "She told me not to walk alone, but she was late again, and I thought if I went to the cafe, she'd find me." Chloe squeezed her hand. "My daddy is late sometimes too," she said matter-of-factly, "but he always shows up." Daniel blinked, stung by how casually children speak truth adults avoid. The storm softened slightly, but rain still drummed against the roof like restless fingers. Finally, headlights swung sharply into the street. A silver sedan screeched to a halt, and a woman jumped out, slamming the door behind her as she ran toward them. Daniel stepped out first, wiping rain from his forehead. The woman's silhouette rushed through the storm with frantic energy. Hair plastered against her cheeks, coat thrown over her pajamas. It was obvious she ran out the door the second she learned where her daughter was. She rounded the truck, and Daniel opened the back door so Emily could step out. "Mum!" the girl cried, stumbling into her arms. The woman dropped to her knees on the wet pavement, wrapping her daughter so tightly it looked painful. "Oh my God, Emily, I'm here. Her voice broke in half. Daniel watched quietly, relieved. Then the woman lifted her face to thank him, except the moment her eyes found his, she froze, completely. Not like someone trying to recognize a stranger, not like someone startled. No, her body went rigid, the way someone does when a ghost stands in front of them. Rain slid down her face, but Daniel saw the exact moment the color drained from her cheeks. "You," she whispered, breath trembling. Daniel frowned, confused. "Do I know you?" The woman didn't answer at first. Her grip tightened around her daughter, as if instinctively protecting her from something that wasn't there. Emily looked between them, sensing the strange tension. Chloe stepped closer to her dad, holding his hand. The woman swallowed hard, eyes trembling with something that looked dangerously close to old pain. "I didn't know it would be you," she finally managed. Daniel stared at her through the rain, his confusion deepening. He searched her face, trying to understand. Something about her eyes, hazel, sharp, wounded, felt vaguely familiar, like a memory he couldn't touch. But he couldn't place her. Not under the storm. Not in this moment. She wrapped an arm around Emily, stood slowly, and took a small step back, as if distance could protect her. Daniel lifted his palm slightly, not in defense, but in concern. "Ma'am, whatever you think happened." "No," she cut him off softly, shaking her head. "It's not what you think. I wasn't prepared to see you again." Daniel blinked slowly, stunned by the implication that they shared a past he couldn't recall, a past that clearly meant more to her than to him. And under the rain, in the fading echo of thunder, he had the sinking feeling that this wasn't the first time fate had thrown both their lives into the same storm. For a moment, no one moved. Rainwater ran down the woman's cheeks, blurring with the shine in her eyes. And Daniel had the strange sensation that time had folded in on itself, that there was something he was supposed to remember and couldn't reach. Emily tightened her arms around her mother's neck, confused by the silence. "Mum," she whispered, "you're shaking." The woman blinked, as if waking up. She smoothed Emily's wet hair, forcing her gaze away from Daniel just long enough to find her voice. "I'm okay, sweetheart. I was just scared when I couldn't find you." Her tone softened for her daughter, then trembled again when she glanced back at Daniel. "Thank you," she said, the words sounding dragged out of someplace stiff, "for staying with her. You didn't have to." Daniel shrugged slightly, uncomfortable with praise for something that felt like basic decency. "It's nothing," he said. "I have a daughter too. I'd want someone to do the same for her." Chloe peeked out from behind him then, lifting a small hand in a shy wave. "Hi," she murmured to Emily's mom, then looked at Emily. "You left your hair tie in the truck." She held up a pale blue elastic, the only bright color in the washed-out night. Emily reached for it automatically, then hesitated, eyes flicking to her mother. "Can I say goodbye?" she asked. Her mother's face grew even more complicated, some mix of relief, guilt, and something else Daniel couldn't read. "Just for a minute," the woman whispered, loosening her hold. The girls stepped a little aside, huddling under the awning of the nearby closed florist shop, while rain dripped steadily from its edge. Chloe spoke in that blunt, honest way kids do. "I get scared too when my daddy is late. But he's really good at fixing things. Maybe your mum is really good at fixing things too." Emily glanced back at the woman, as if unsure whether that was true, but she nodded anyway, trusting the kindness more than the words. Daniel watched them with a tug in his chest. The storm around them was easing, but inside him it felt like something else was gathering. He cleared his throat and turned back to the woman. "I'm glad we found her when we did. It's getting colder. You should get her home." She nodded, but didn't move. Instead, she drew in a slow breath, like she was gathering courage against the night. "You really don't recognize me, do you?" she asked quietly. Up close now he could see the faint lines at the corners of her eyes, the exhaustion layered under expensive skincare, the way her jaw clenched when she was holding back too much. Daniel frowned, searching her face again. A decade slid past his mind. Different garages, night shifts, hospital corridors. Papers he'd signed without really reading them, because he was too tired to protest. "I meet a lot of people," he said, voice gentle but honest. "I'm sorry She shook her head once, almost smiling, though it was bitter and sad all at once. "Of course you don't. People remember the day their life falls apart. They don't necessarily remember the woman in the suit who handed them the final document." His stomach tightened. Something about the woman in the suit lit up a buried hallway in his memory. Fluorescent lights, a beige conference room, him sitting there with an untouched cup of coffee, fingers raw from double shifts. A woman across from him, perfectly composed, sliding a paper across the table with legal words at the top and a company logo that had once meant stability. He swallowed. "What company?" he asked quietly, even though he already knew. Her eyes flickered with a mix of remorse and inevitability. "Havers and Sons Manufacturing," she said. "You worked the assembly line. Night shift. You missed 3 consecutive days during the audit quarter. We met in a small office with bad coffee and a window that didn't open." The entire room came back to him then. The way his heart had pounded, because those 3 days he'd been at the hospital, watching his wife's chest rise and fall under too many wires, praying for one more day. And the woman in front of him had kept her voice professional, distant, explaining that company policy didn't make exceptions for undocumented absences. "You told me," Daniel said slowly, "that the company had to be fair to everyone, that if they bent the rules for me, they'd have to do it for others." His mouth tasted like metal. "You said you were sorry, but it was out of your hands." The woman closed her eyes briefly, pain flaring across her features. "My name is Olivia," she whispered after a moment. "Olivia Hart. I was the HR director then." Daniel stared at her, the storm outside suddenly feeling quieter than the one roaring in his chest. Olivia Hart. He had repeated that name in his head so many nights when the rent was due and the fridge was almost empty, when he'd held a newborn Chloe and wondered how he was supposed to provide for her alone. That name had been part of the story he told himself about why his life had collapsed so fast. And now she was standing in the rain, clutching her daughter like a lifeline, looking at him not with corporate distance, but with a rawness that didn't fit the polished woman from his memory. "You fired me," he said, not accusing, just stating a fact that tasted old and fresh at the same time. Olivia flinched. Emily and Chloe, still under the awning, fell silent, sensing the temperature dropping between the adults. "I signed the papers," Olivia said, her voice low. "But you were already marked for termination. I didn't fight it hard enough. That's what I live with." He almost laughed, but the sound got stuck halfway out. "You were my whole world's undoing for a while," he admitted. "Losing that job, it pushed everything over the edge." His hand drifted unconsciously to his wallet, where a folded copy of that termination letter had lived for years. A reminder of who not to become, of how fragile life was under other people's decisions. Rain pattered around them, softer now, and somewhere in the distance a car horn honked, impatient with the traffic the storm had snarled. Olivia hugged Emily closer, as if suddenly aware of how exposed this conversation was. "I didn't know about your wife," she said quietly. "Not until later. You never told me she was in the hospital." Daniel's jaw clenched. "I tried," he said. "At the factory, weeks before. No one listened long enough. I was just another tired guy asking for leniency in a place that didn't have space for it." Their eyes locked. The weight of years suspended between two people who had once been on opposite sides of a desk. Chloe broke the tension first. She ran back to Daniel and tugged his sleeve. "Daddy, Emily drew something for you," she said, holding out a small crumpled sheet of paper that looked like it had been rescued from the depths of a backpack. Emily followed, cheeks flushed. "It's for you and Chloe," she murmured, looking down. "Because you stayed. And my mum says most people wouldn't have." Daniel took the paper carefully. On it, in messy, colored pencil lines that had clearly been scribbled in a hurry, was a drawing of a tall figure holding an umbrella over a smaller one, rain falling all around them. Beside them, a stick figure girl with brown hair held hands with another girl with lighter hair, both smiling. At the bottom, in uneven letters, Emily had written, "The kind man." Something in Daniel's chest softened and ached at the same time. He glanced up at Olivia, who watched him with eyes full of conflict. "She wanted to give it to you herself," Olivia said, voice barely audible. "I didn't, Kocher." "I know," he replied, "because children's drawings didn't lie. They captured moments how they felt them, not how adults spun them." He folded the paper carefully and slid it into his wallet, right beside the worn termination letter he'd kept all these years. The contrast didn't escape him. Olivia noticed the motion, her gaze dropping to his hand. "You still have it, don't you?" she asked quietly. "The letter." Daniel exhaled, a humorless smile tugging at his lips. "Some things are hard to throw away," he said. "They remind you who you had to become." He didn't pull it out. Not yet. The girls didn't need that story laid bare on a wet sidewalk. Olivia nodded, understanding more than he wished she did. "I turned in my resignation a year after that," she admitted. "I told myself it was for a better position. But the truth is, I couldn't look at that office door without thinking of people who walked out of it with their lives in a box." The confession landed between them with a dull, honest thud. Daniel didn't know what to do with it. Anger and empathy tangled in ways that didn't give him a clean answer. "People make choices," he said eventually. "Some of us get to choose from behind a desk. Some of us pick up the pieces afterward." Olivia nodded, and for a second, lightning flashed somewhere distant, illuminating her face not as the woman who had once signed away his job, but as another exhausted parent with regrets heavier than the rain. Emily tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Can we go home now?" she whispered. "I'm really tired." Olivia brushed her daughter's cheek. "Yes, sweetheart." She looked back at Daniel, swallowing hard. "I'm opening a new logistics office downtown," she said suddenly, as if blurting out a truth she'd been holding. "I'm technically your boss's boss now, the auto shop you work in. It's part of the subsidiary I oversee." Daniel stared at her, stunned. You're… what? I was supposed to visit the shop next week, she said, almost wincing. I didn't expect our first encounter to be like this. The universe, Daniel thought, had a dark sense of timing. He rubbed his forehead, letting out a long, slow breath. Guess HR really does follow you, he muttered, the joke dry but not completely hostile. Olivia's lips curved in the faintest sad smile. I don't work in HR anymore, she said. I'm trying to fix things from higher up. But that's a long story. She stepped back, opening her car door. You don't have to talk to me at the shop. I'll respect that. But I am grateful you were the one who found my daughter tonight. Even if I don't deserve that kind of symmetry. He didn't answer right away. The girls climbed into the back seat of her car, Emily looking out through the fogging glass with a small wave. Chloe waved back enthusiastically. Bye, Emily, she called. Maybe we'll see you again. Yeah, Emily mouthed, pressing her palm to the window. Maybe. Olivia closed the door gently, then met Daniel's gaze one last time. There was a question in her eyes, but she didn't ask it. Instead, she simply said, "Drive safe." Daniel, as if she'd been carrying his name in her memory for far longer than he'd carried hers, he nodded and turned back to his truck. As he slid into the driver's seat, Chloe shifted closer, buckling her belt. "Daddy?" she asked as he started the engine. "Are you mad at Emily's mum?" The question was soft, but it speared straight through him. He stared at the wipers, dragging streaks of water across the windshield, his fingers tightening around the wheel. "I don't know yet, kiddo," he answered honestly. "Sometimes grown-ups feel a lot of things at once, and it takes time to figure out which one is the loudest." Chloe considered that, then nodded, like it made sense. She looked sad, she said. "Like the day you found the old box with Mum's hospital papers." Daniel's throat went tight. He couldn't lie to her. "Yeah," he whispered. "She did." They drove home through streets still shining with rain, the city reflecting back distorted lights like a blurred memory. At a red light, Daniel pulled out his wallet. The old termination letter was there, edges frayed, ink slightly faded. Beside it now, carefully tucked into the same slot, lay Emily's drawing of the man holding an umbrella over two girls in the rain. Two stories pressed against each other, the night his life broke, and the night he'd chosen to stop and hold the storm off someone else. For the first time in years he wondered if fate sometimes brought the same people back, not to reopen the wound, but to see what you'd become since it happened. Daniel barely slept that night, even after he tucked Chloe into bed and made sure the apartment's old heater didn't sputter out again. His mind kept returning to Olivia's face, pale under the street lamp, stunned, almost frightened. He lay on his back staring at the ceiling, the sound of distant traffic mixing with the storm's fading rumble, and felt the past stirring like dust in a room he'd kept closed for years. He tried telling himself it didn't matter, that the night was over, that he'd probably never see her again outside that brief encounter on the curb. But the universe, he suspected, wasn't done rearranging pieces he'd thought were fixed in place. By morning the rain had stopped, leaving the air smelling of wet pavement and cold metal. Chloe sat at the small kitchen table, swinging her legs as she ate cereal, humming to herself in that soft way she had when she was happy. Daniel watched her, absorbing the calm she radiated, grounding himself in her innocence. But even that grounding didn't stop his heartbeat from stuttering when he checked his phone, a message notification from an unknown number. "This is Olivia Hart. I hope it's okay that I reached out. Could we talk today? About last night. And about the shop." Daniel stared at the message, thumb hovering over the screen. For a moment, he considered ignoring it, letting the past stay buried. But something in Olivia's voice from the night before, something raw, almost pleading, echoed in him. He set the phone down without replying and dragged a hand through his hair. "Daddy?" Chloe asked, milk dribbling down her spoon. "You're doing the face." Daniel blinked. "What face?" "The thinking one. When you look like you want to fix something, but you don't know where to start." He exhaled, giving her a half smile. "It's grown-up stuff, kiddo. Nothing for you to worry about." Her eyes softened, too wise for her age. "Are you thinking about Emily's mum?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. That was enough of an answer for Chloe. She nodded like she understood, then hopped down from her chair to grab her shoes. "Can I draw something today after school? I want to make a picture for her." She looked like she needed a picture. Daniel swallowed the lump forming in his throat. "Yeah," he murmured. "I think she might like that." He dropped Chloe at school, kissed her forehead, and sat in the truck for a long moment before finally pulling out of the lot. The auto shop where he worked was a converted warehouse, old and loud, smelling permanently of motor oil and worn rubber. The kind of place where the radio was always a little too loud and jokes were shouted across the room. Today, though, Daniel walked in feeling different, as though the space he'd always known belonged to a different version of him. The foreman, a gruff but soft-hearted man named Mitchell, clapped him on the back. "You look like you didn't sleep, Hale." "Long night?" Daniel shrugged. "Something like that." Mitchell nodded toward the bulletin board. "Heads up, Big Boss is visiting next week. Some logistics head from corporate. Word is she's strict." Daniel felt his chest tighten. "What's her name?" Mitchell checked his clipboard. "Hart. Olivia Hart." Daniel's breath hitched, though he kept his expression even. "You know her?" Mitchell asked, raising an eyebrow. Daniel shook his head. "Not exactly. Not in a way that made sense to explain." He threw himself into work, tightening bolts, diagnosing engines, listening to the familiar hum of machines in an attempt to drown out the storm still rolling quietly inside him. But every time he reached into his pocket for a tool, he felt the folded drawing in his wallet, a reminder of the night that had shifted something inside him. Around midday, he stepped outside for air. That was when he saw her. Olivia was standing on the edge of the lot, dressed in a dark coat, with her hair pulled back, less composed than she probably intended to be. She wasn't accompanied by corporate staff, no clipboard, no assistant. She seemed strangely small in the vast space, shoulders tight, hands clasped like she was bracing herself for something. Daniel froze, breaths tangling in his chest. She saw him, and relief flickered across her face, but so did apprehension. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, voice steady, despite the tremor underneath. "I wasn't sure you would." Daniel crossed his arms, not defensively, but searching for structure. "I didn't say yes." "I know," she replied softly. "But you didn't say no either." Around them, mechanics moved back and forth, the noise of machines filling the gaps in the silence between their words. Daniel gestured toward the small break room. "Let's talk inside." They stepped into the cramped space with flickering fluorescent lights and a coffee machine older than both of them. Daniel leaned against the counter. Olivia remained by the door, unable to meet his eyes for a moment. "I owe you an explanation," she began. "Not just for last night, but for everything." He exhaled slowly. "I don't know what I'm supposed to say here, Olivia. I'm not angry like I was back then, but I'm not fine either." She nodded, accepting the truth without flinching. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to have the whole story." Daniel waited, arms relaxed at his sides, though his chest tightened. Olivia stared at the floor for a long moment, then lifted her gaze. "The day I fired you, I had just come from my own hospital visit. My father had a stroke that morning. I was told to come to work anyway because we were in the middle of quarterly reviews. I sat in that office knowing that every decision I made could ruin someone's life. And then you walked in." Her voice faltered. "You looked exhausted, hollow, and I thought, God, I thought you were just another worker who didn't take the policy seriously. I asked if there was an explanation, but I didn't push. I didn't see you." She wrapped her arms around herself. "2 days later, when I learned your wife had passed, I realized what I'd done. I told myself I'd been following policy, but missing those 3 days to be with her. That shouldn't have cost you everything." Daniel's throat tightened. He'd spent years imagining that day as cold, calculated, deliberate. Hearing it now, knowing she'd been fighting her own battle, didn't erase the damage, but it reframed the angles. "Why tell me this now?" he asked quietly. "Because you deserve the truth," she said, "and because I didn't want you to think I forgot you. I didn't, not for a single day." She hesitated, then continued. "When I left HR, it was partly because of you. I didn't want to sit behind a desk making decisions that harmed people anymore. I moved into logistics because I wanted to build, not break." Silence hung between them, heavy but not hostile. Daniel breathed in slowly. "Last night," he said, "you looked at me like you saw a ghost." Olivia nodded. "I did, not because I'm afraid of you, because I'm afraid of the reminder of who I used to be." "People change," he murmured. "Sometimes," she replied. Just then, Mitchell opened the door halfway before realizing the tension inside. "Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt." He looked at Daniel. "Someone's here to see you." Daniel frowned. "Who?" Mitchell shrugged. "A little girl, brown hair, holding a lunchbox like it's a treasure chest." Daniel's eyes widened. "Emily?" He stepped out to find Emily standing at the edge of the lot, wearing a pink jacket and holding a tin lunchbox decorated with flowers. Olivia followed him out, stunned. "Emily? What are you doing here?" Emily looked up, cheeks flushed. "Mum said to stay home, but I wanted to give something to Chloe, to say thank you." She lifted the lunchbox. "I made cookies. Dad taught me last weekend." Daniel softened, kneeling to her height. "That's really kind, Emily. Chloe will love them." Emily beamed, proud. Olivia looked between her daughter and Daniel, conflict flickering in her eyes. "You shouldn't have come alone," she said, kneeling. "I was in the car," Emily whispered. "I didn't tell you because I wanted to be brave today." Olivia closed her eyes briefly. "You are brave," she murmured. "Just don't sky me like that." Daniel felt a warmth in his chest he didn't expect. Emily reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out something else, a folded piece of paper. "This is for you too," she said shyly. Daniel opened it. Another drawing. This one showed him standing next to Olivia, both holding umbrellas, while Emily and Chloe stood beneath them, smiling. Above the figures, written in larger letters, were the words, "Connected by the rain." Olivia froze. Daniel's breath caught. The drawing felt like a prophecy written in colored pencils. Emily looked up, innocently. "Mum said you and her used to know each other in a hard way, so I drew a nice way." Olivia swallowed, her voice barely a whisper. "Emily, this is beautiful." Daniel folded the drawing carefully, placing it beside the first one, in his wallet. "Thank you, Emily," he said softly. "Really?" Emily smiled and reached for Olivia's hand. "Can we go home now?" Olivia nodded, standing slowly. "Yes, sweetheart." She looked at Daniel one last time. "We're not done talking." "If you want." He didn't answer immediately, but as the wind picked up and the clouds parted slightly, allowing the first sliver of sunlight to stretch across the lot, he realized something had shifted inside him. Not forgiveness, not yet, but space. Space where something new could grow. And when Olivia turned toward her car, Daniel found himself calling out, "Hey, tell Emily I'll make sure Chloe gets her cookies." Olivia smiled, small, sincere, vulnerable. "I will," she said. And for the first time in years, Daniel felt the past loosen its grip, making room for the possibility that storms, when survived, sometimes bring people back together for reasons neither of them can explain yet. Daniel didn't expect the days that followed to feel different, but they did. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a subtle shift, like the air after a storm when everything is still damp, but cleaner. He carried on with work as usual, tightening bolts, replacing valves, tuning engines, but his mind kept drifting to 2 drawings in his wallet and the strange, quiet thread that now connected his life to Olivia's again. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. It wasn't resentment anymore either. It was something suspended between the two, fragile and alive. Chloe noticed the change before anyone else. "You smile more," she said one morning while tying her shoes. "And you don't sigh as much when you drink coffee." Daniel huffed a laugh. "Do I sigh?" "A lot," she replied, nodding with an authority only children possess. "But not this week." He didn't know what to do with that, so he tousled her hair and changed the subject, though he carried her observation with him all day. That Friday, the shop buzzed with rumors. "Corporate sending the new director next Tuesday," Mitchell announced to the crew. "Clean your stations, wear something that doesn't smell like gasoline, and don't pretend you know more than you actually do." A couple of the younger mechanics groaned. "She's strict?" one asked. Mitchell shrugged. "Word is she's sharp, no nonsense, and hates inefficiency." Daniel kept his expression unreadable. If they only knew. Saturday morning arrived with bright skies and a soft breeze, the kind of weather that invited people outside. Daniel and Chloe stopped at the park after grocery shopping. She ran ahead to the swings, her laughter floating through the air. Daniel sat on a bench, stretching his legs, enjoying the rare quiet moment. He didn't notice Olivia until she spoke. "Is this seat taken?" He looked up to see her standing there, wearing jeans and a simple light sweater, her hair pulled back casually instead of the polished bun she wore on work days. She looked younger like this, softer, more real. Emily stood beside her, holding a tote bag decorated with patches. Daniel blinked. "Oh no, please." He moved slightly to make space. Olivia sat, smoothing her hands over her knees. Emily ran to join Chloe, and within seconds the 2 girls were already giggling, as if they'd been best friends for years. "They've been asking to see each other all week," Olivia said, watching them with a faint smile. Emily kept drawing things she wanted to show Chloe. "I told her we'd try to find a day." She glanced at Daniel. "I hope this isn't too strange." "It's not," he admitted, though he still felt the edges of discomfort. "Just unexpected. That seems to be our theme," she murmured. For a while they just sat there, 2 adults, facing the echoes of a shared past they still didn't know how to cleanly untangle. The breeze rustled, leaves above them, sunlight flickering through the branches. Olivia inhaled deeply. "I've been thinking about what you said, about choices." Daniel kept his gaze on the playground. "Yeah? I wanted to explain something else," she said quietly. Not as an excuse but as context. He didn't answer, but he didn't shut her down either. "When I fired you," Olivia said, voice trembling, "I was in a place I am not proud of. I spent years doing everything by the book, 'cause I thought responsibility meant never bending. I lived in fear of disappointing people above me, fear of losing control, fear that if I wasn't perfect, things would fall apart." Daniel let her words settle. "Sounds lonely," he said finally. "It was." She swallowed. "And the thing I hate most is that I passed that loneliness on to others, to you. You were a good worker. I remember that part clearly. You showed up tired, but you never yelled, never cut corners, never blamed anyone. You were steady. I admired that. Even then, Daniel didn't know how to respond. Compliments from her felt strange, like discovering a door in a wall that had always seemed solid. "I can't undo what happened," Olivia continued, "but I'd like to understand it with you, if you'll let me." Daniel exhaled slowly. I'm not sure I know how to talk about it. You don't have to know how, she said gently. Just start anywhere. He shifted on the bench, rubbing his palms together. Losing that job wasn't the worst part, he began. It was what it symbolized. Everything in my life collapsed so fast. My wife was dying, Chloe was a newborn, and I felt like I was trapped underwater. When I sat in that office, I thought, maybe someone would listen. Maybe someone would see me. His voice went quiet. But you didn't look at me that way. You looked through me. Olivia's eyes watered. I know, she whispered. I've replayed that day 1,000 times. I know exactly how I looked at you, and I hate myself for it. Daniel shook his head. Don't do that. You don't get to carry all the blame. Life is messy. People make mistakes, but yours cost me years I'll never get back. He didn't say it venomously, just truthfully. Olivia nodded, blinking through the truth like someone absorbing a wound she'd earned. Thank you for saying it, she whispered. Even if it hurts. They fell silent again, not painfully this time, but contemplatively. The girls' laughter drifted toward them as Emily pushed Chloe on the swing, both squealing with delight. I don't want my daughter to inherit my fear, Olivia said eventually. I want her to be able to face her mistakes and grow from them. I want her to see that adults can change. She turned toward him. So I'm starting with this, with you. Daniel met her gaze. And what do you expect from me? Nothing, she said immediately, except honesty, whatever that looks like. He nodded slowly. I can do that. Olivia offered a small, tentative smile. Then maybe we can rebuild something. Not a friendship yet. Not forgiveness. Just understanding. Daniel considered her words, watching the sunlight catch on her hair, her face open and unguarded. Understanding, he echoed. Yeah, I think we can start there. For the next hour, they talked, not about the past anymore, but about their daughters, work, small, everyday things. Didn't feel forced. It felt like two people quietly testing the possibility of new ground. When it was time to go, Chloe and Emily hugged like they'd known each other forever. Emily handed Chloe a small folded note with a flower sticker on it. For you, she whispered. Chloe grinned. I'll read it in the car. Olivia approached Daniel one last time. Tuesday, she said softly. When I come to the shop, I won't be your past. I'll just be your boss, or colleague, or whatever you're comfortable with. But afterward, if you want, I'd like to talk again. Daniel studied her. The woman who had once been the sharp edge of his downfall was now standing in front of him. Open, vulnerable, asking, not demanding, another step forward. He nodded. Yeah, he said quietly. We can talk. Her shoulders loosened, relief softening the tension in her face. Good, she whispered. Have a good weekend, Daniel. You too, Olivia. As he drove home with Chloe humming beside him, Daniel realized something profound. The universe didn't bring people back to reopen old wounds. It brought them back, so you could see how much you'd healed. Chloe unfolded Emily's note in the back seat. Daddy, she said, smiling, it says she wants us to come again next weekend. Can we? Daniel glanced at the drawings in his wallet, at the storm he had once survived, at the sunlight glinting on the road ahead. Yeah, he said, I think we can. And for the first time in years, the road didn't feel like something he had to endure. It felt like something he could walk forward into, maybe not with certainty, maybe not with answers, but with hope that the past didn't have to define the ending. Sometimes, he realized, redemption didn't arrive with grand gestures or perfect closure. Sometimes it came quietly, through rain, through children, through second chances offered in soft voices on quiet Saturdays. Sometimes it began exactly where two broken people finally chose to understand each other.